In a remote mountain village, the legend of the Ice Widow haunts the townsfolk each winter. They say she was a bride betrayed on her wedding day, her tears freezing her heart and cursing the land with endless snow. Now, every winter solstice, she roams the frozen landscape, luring the unwary to their doom. When a young woman named Evelyn and her family become stranded in the village during the solstice, she discovers the legend is far more real and far more dangerous than anyone could imagine. To save her family, Evelyn must unravel the Ice Widow's tragic past and confront the icy specter herself. The storm hit just before dusk, fierce and unrelenting. Evelyn gripped the wheel tightly, her knuckles white as the snow whipped against the windshield. The mountain road was barely visible, the headlights doing little to pierce the swirling blizzard. "Are we almost there?" her younger brother, Jamie, asked from the back seat. His voice was a mix of fear and impatience. "Almost," Evelyn lied. The GPS had given up miles ago, and the printed map on the passenger seat was useless in the storm. She glanced at their father, slumped in the passenger seat, his breathing shallow and uneven. The trip had been his idea. A final family vacation before his worsening illness made travel impossible. But now they were lost, the storm closing in around them like a living thing. A light appeared in the distance, faint but steady. Evelyn's heart leapt. "Look, a village." The car skidded to a stop just outside the cluster of buildings. The village was small, no more than a dozen cottages with snow-covered roofs and faint lights glowing in their windows. A single street wound through the center, leading to a church with a tall, spired roof. Evelyn climbed out of the car, shivering as the icy wind bit through her coat. She approached the nearest building, a small inn with a weathered sign. "The Widow's Rest." The door creaked open, and a woman stepped out. She was older, her face lined with years of harsh winters, but her eyes were sharp and wary. "You're lucky to have made it here," the woman said, ushering them inside. "The storm's the worst we've seen in years." Evelyn helped her father inside, Jamie trailing behind with their bags. The warmth of the inn's common room was a welcome relief, the fire crackling in the hearth and casting long shadows on the wooden walls. "We'll take any room you have," Evelyn said. The innkeeper's gaze lingered on her father, then shifted to Jamie. "You'll be safe here," she said, though her tone suggested she wasn't entirely sure. Later that evening, as the storm howled outside, the innkeeper joined them by the fire. Her name was Marta, and she spoke with the weight of someone who had seen too much. "You arrived on the solstice," she said, stirring her tea absently. Evelyn frowned. "Is that significant?" Marta hesitated, then leaned closer. "It's the longest night of the year, the night she comes." "Who?" Jamie asked, his curiosity piqued. Marta's voice dropped to a whisper. "The Ice Widow." Evelyn sighed, her exhaustion evident. "Another local ghost story?" Marta's expression hardened. "It's no story. The Ice Widow is real, and if you're not careful, she'll take you." Marta told the tale as the firelight flickered across her face. Long ago, a young woman named Lilia lived in the village. She was beautiful, with hair as dark as midnight and eyes like the summer sky. She fell in love with a traveling merchant, and the two planned to marry on the winter solstice. But on the day of the wedding, the merchant never arrived. Some said he was caught in a storm. Others whispered he had abandoned her for another. Heartbroken, Lilia wandered into the mountains, her tears freezing as they fell. She was never seen again, but the village soon discovered her curse. Each solstice, when the longest night falls, the Ice Widow returns, her frozen heart seeking to claim what was lost. "She takes the unwary," Marta said, her voice low. "Those foolish enough to wander outside on the solstice. They say she lures them with her voice, soft and sweet, like the wind through the trees. But if you follow her..." She trailed off, her meaning clear. Evelyn shivered, though the room was warm. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. Her father was coughing softly in the next room, and Jamie was curled up on the cot beside her, snoring lightly. The storm had quieted, but the air still felt heavy, oppressive. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, Marta's story echoing in her mind. And then she heard it, a faint sound just beyond the window. It was soft at first, almost imperceptible, like someone humming a lullaby. The melody was strange, haunting, yet oddly comforting. Evelyn sat up, her heart pounding. She moved to the window and peered out into the night. The snow-covered street was empty, the village silent. But the sound continued, drifting through the air like a song carried on the wind. She shook Jamie awake. "Do you hear that?" He groaned, rubbing his eyes. "Hear what?" "The humming," Evelyn whispered. "Outside." Jamie listened, his face paling as the sound grew clearer. "What is that?" Evelyn didn't answer. Her gaze was fixed on the edge of the village, where a faint figure appeared, barely visible through the swirling snow. It was a woman, her silhouette graceful and impossibly still. She stood motionless, her long hair blowing in the wind. And then she turned, her face illuminated by the pale glow of the snow. Her eyes locked onto Evelyn's, and a cold, hollow voice echoed in her mind. "Come to me." Evelyn stumbled back from the window, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The image of the woman lingered in her mind, her pale, frozen beauty and eyes that seemed to pierce through the storm. "What's wrong?" Jamie asked, his voice trembling. Evelyn shook her head, forcing herself to stay calm. I think I saw someone. Outside." Jamie's face blanched. "You mean her? The Ice Widow?" "It's just a story," Evelyn said quickly, though her voice lacked conviction. "Probably just my imagination." But deep down, she knew better. The humming had felt real, too real, and the way the woman had looked at her, like she was waiting. She shut the curtains and turned back to Jamie. "We're staying inside. No one goes out, no matter what." The storm raged on, but Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She sat by the bed, staring at the door, while Jamie drifted back into an uneasy sleep. Hours passed, the wind outside howling like a living thing. Just as Evelyn's eyelids began to grow heavy, the faint sound of humming returned. Her eyes snapped open. The melody was clearer now, drifting through the cracks in the walls, wrapping around her like a cold embrace. "Come to me." The voice was soft, barely above a whisper, but it sent a chill down her spine. She turned to Jamie, who was still fast asleep, and then glanced at the door. It would be so easy to follow it. Just for a moment. Evelyn shook her head violently, gripping the edge of the chair. The voice was like a spell, weaving its way into her thoughts. "Stay inside," she muttered to herself, Marta's warning ringing in her ears. But the humming grew louder, more insistent. Her body felt heavy, her limbs sluggish, as if the air itself was weighing her down. "Evelyn," she froze. This time, the voice spoke her name. Her heart pounded as she turned toward the door. Her feet moved on their own, one step at a time, until she was standing just inches away from the threshold. The cold air seeped through the cracks, biting at her skin. "Evelyn?" The voice called again, sweeter now, almost familiar. Her hand reached for the doorknob. A loud crash snapped her out of her trance. She spun around to see Jamie sitting up in bed, his eyes wide with fear. He had knocked over the small lamp on the bedside table. "Don't go," he whispered, his voice shaking. "Please." Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. For a moment she couldn't speak, then she nodded, stepping back from the door. Jamie's words had broken the spell, but the voice outside continued to hum, softer now, as if it were waiting. The next morning the storm had subsided, leaving the village blanketed in fresh snow. The sun was pale and weak, casting long shadows over the cottages. Evelyn sat with Marta in the common room, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of tea. "You heard her," Marta said. It wasn't a question, Evelyn nodded. She called my name. Marta's face darkened. Then she's chosen you. What does that mean? Evelyn asked, her voice trembling. The innkeeper leaned closer, her voice low. The Ice Widow doesn't just take the unwary. She chooses those who remind her of what she lost, the ones who mirror her grief. Evelyn's stomach turned. I don't understand. Marta hesitated. You said your father is ill? Yes. And your family? You're all here because you wanted one last moment together? Evelyn nodded, the lump in her throat growing larger. Loss calls to loss, Marta said softly. Your pain, it resonates with her. She sees herself in you. Evelyn shook her head, refusing to believe it. There has to be a way to stop this, to protect my family. Marta's expression grew grim. There's only one way to stop the Ice Widow. You have to face her, confront her where her heart froze. Evelyn frowned. The mountains? Marta nodded. She lures people into the forest, to the cliffs where she died. If you go there, you might be able to break the curse. But no one who's tried has ever returned. Jamie appeared in the doorway, his face pale. You're not going out there, are you? Evelyn met his gaze, her heart heavy. I have to. If I don't, she'll come for all of us. As night fell, Evelyn prepared herself for the journey. She wrapped herself in layers of clothing, her boots laced tightly, and her flashlight tucked into her coat. Marta handed her a small vial of something blue and shimmering. What is this? Evelyn asked. A charm, Marta said. It might keep her at bay, but it won't last long. Jamie stood by the door, his arms crossed. I'm coming with you. No, you're not, Evelyn said firmly. You're staying here, where it's safe. Jamie opened his mouth to argue, but Marta placed a hand on his shoulder. She's right, the innkeeper said. If she fails, you'll need to protect your father. Jamie clenched his fists but said nothing. Evelyn stepped outside, the cold biting at her exposed skin. The village was eerily quiet, the only sound the crunch of her boots on the snow. The forest loomed ahead, dark and forbidding. She could feel the Ice Widow's presence, a chilling weight pressing down on her chest. Come to me. The voice was faint but unmistakable. Evelyn took a deep breath and stepped into the trees. The forest was a labyrinth of shadows and snow. The farther she went, the colder it became, until each breath felt like ice in her lungs. The flashlight's beam danced across the twisted branches, casting eerie shapes on the ground. The humming grew louder, guiding her deeper into the woods. Evelyn's heart pounded, but she forced herself to keep moving. Finally, she emerged into a clearing. The cliffs rose high above her, their icy surface glinting in the moonlight. And there, at the edge, stood the Ice Widow. She was beautiful and terrifying, her pale form shimmering like frost. Her eyes locked onto Evelyn's, and a faint smile crossed her lips. You came, the Ice Widow said, her voice like the wind. Evelyn's knees felt weak, but she stood her ground. I'm here to end this, she said. The Ice Widow tilted her head, her expression curious. End it? Why would you want to end something so beautiful? This isn't beautiful, Evelyn said. It's a curse. The Ice Widow's smile faded. It's grief. You carry it too. I can feel it. Evelyn hesitated. Yes, I'm grieving, but I don't let it consume me. You don't have to either. The Ice Widow's eyes narrowed. You don't understand. I was abandoned, betrayed. My love left me, and the world forgot me. Why should I let them go unpunished? Because holding on to the past only causes more pain, Evelyn said, her voice trembling. The Ice Widow's form flickered, her features softening for a moment. But then the wind howled, and her expression hardened once more. You cannot save them, the Ice Widow said. You cannot save yourself. The ground beneath Evelyn's feet began to crack, the snow swirling into a vortex around them. She reached for the vial Marta had given her and hurled it at the Ice Widow. The blue liquid exploded in a burst of light, and the Ice Widow let out a piercing scream. Her form wavered, the frost retreating as the charm's magic took hold. Evelyn seized the moment and stepped closer. "This ends now," she said, her voice firm. The Ice Widow's gaze met hers, and for a fleeting moment Evelyn saw the woman beneath the curse, broken, lost, and longing for peace.